Hello and welcome to Africa Today. I am Mike Okwoche. The signing of the Treaty of Lagos in May 1975 became the foundation of a regional group of 15 countries with a mission to promote economic integration across West Africa. The Economic Community of West African States, Ecowas, sought to achieve its purpose by creating a single large trading bloc through an economic and trading union. Over the years, he has also served as a peacekeeping force in the region, intervening in the crisis of countries like Liberia, Sierra Leone, Mali, Guinea, and Cote d'Ivoire. This it does through the Economic Community of West African States Monitoring Group, also known as ECOMOG. Now, what are your thoughts on the activities of ECOWAS in the West African region and its impact on its people? Share your thoughts with us on Twitter at TVC Africa Today, or send an email to africatoday@tvcnews.tv and you'll surely be heard. We'll take this report now, and Africa Today will be right back. Thanks for joining us.
The 43rd Ordinary Session of ECOWAS instructed the Commission to expedite a review of peace and security with respect to the military response capability against the background of lessons learned in Mali. The efforts of ECOWAS at restoring peace to Mali have indeed yielded results. The Commission, however, admits it was faced with several challenges ranging from lack of proper coordination to competing interests. The Mali crisis has, among other things, taught ECOWAS how to deal with issues of terrorism. Prime among the lessons learned was how to detect early warning signs.
It requires a type of expertise in which you appreciate and work with the signs of early warning, but not paralyzing and creating a sense of panic in the entire society.
Besides being confronted with initial hostility from key internal stakeholders in Mali, the region had to contend with external interests and motives. Finally, and most importantly, the region's military preparation and deployment were severely handicapped by formidable financial, logistical, and strategic lift challenges.
President of the ECOWAS Commission noted that the successful inclusion of the presidential and legislative elections between July and December 2013 also marked a successful inclusion of the ECOWAS-facilitated and internationally supported transitional roadmap aimed at the restoration of full constitutional order and institutional stability in the country. The ECOWAS Commission cautioned that criticisms leveled against parties in this exercise are not meant to slight them or to diminish the immense contribution they made towards the stabilization of Mali and the preservation of regional peace and security. Yuri Tejare, TVC News, Accra.
Right, earlier this week, the Economic Community of West African States met with its local and international partners in Ghana to review the regional bloc's intervention in Mali, amongst other issues. Now, joining us to look at those issues on Africa Today, we have Achike Chude of the Joint Action Front, a civil society organization, and he's also an African affairs expert. It's good to have you join us today.
It's a pleasure, man.
And you're welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Right, and later on we'll be linking up on phone to Eunice Ejare, TVC News correspondent in Ghana, and certainly Judy Lowe of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa is based in Abuja. Certainly he will be joining us on the program too. Now, Chike, let's start it this way. The ECOWAS, compared to the AU and the UN, hasn't been on the news much of late, recently, as the case may be. How would you assess its impact on its people generally, just on the summary?
Well, I think it's only natural that it will not be as much in the news as the AU and the United Nations. These are bigger international organizations, and the tendency or the possibility of them to be involved in actions that would make the news more or less is much higher. But that is not to say that the ECOWAS has not been embroiled in its own issues, trying to solve problems. And in the recent past, they have been very, very active, especially just as your report did indicate, the crisis in Mali. and the other parts of the African sub-region, and so essentially they have been working, they have always worked. But of course, as you journalists will say, it's only bad news that tends to sell, and sell phenomenally sometimes depending on the nature, of the news. And so even when the Ecowas is working quietly in terms of their economic plans or mandates and so on, people might not really know about that until it is embroiled in one controversy or the other, or trying to solve, issues of conflict, like the one we had in Mali. And for the period that the Mali situation was on, ECOWAS was constantly, in the media, and of course that's as a result of the crisis in Mali. So it's always been there. It's always sometimes working in the background. Yeah.
All right. Now, considering the fact that it was established to assist trade and economy of member states and all of that, but how would you assess the impact vis-a-vis its original ideal?
Yeah. Yes. I mean that has always been the criticism of the ECOWAS, and beyond ECOWAS, the criticism of the African Union, and again beyond even the African Union, the criticism of the United Nations organizations. And I think that it's only normal that you have the ideal, situation in which it was supposed to operate, within which it was supposed to operate, parameters that were set by those who were involved in the formation of the ECOWAS and so on. But of course, we know that the ideal is always different from the reality.
Exactly.
Because you have a picture of an organization and what could be achieved by that organization and so on. But of course, all of these things are dependent on, as we say, all things being equal. And we know that in life, nothing is ever
nothing is really equal.
So you always have, as the great philosopher Heraclitus, I think it was, who said that the only thing that is permanent is change. And so the ECOWAS has made, I want to believe that when you talk about the issue, the movement from the non-aggression, pact that they had to, actual intervention in the affairs of some states, at least politically or militarily, they would seem to have had much more success than when you talk about the economy. Yes, the economic integration.
All right. We'll come back to this. Now, we have Eunice Jare, TVC News correspondent in Ghana, joining us now on the show. Eunice, it's good to have you join us on Africa Today. Now, what were the key issues discussed at the ECOWAS summit in Ghana?
Well, at the meeting, the 3-day meeting, most of the 3-day meeting was behind closed doors. But what we witnessed as media from beginning was the essence of the entire workshop, which was actually to evaluate the activities or the participation of ECOWAS in trying to resolve the Mali crisis. So basically, they looked at they tried to look at what may have started the conflict. They looked at what each party's role was in trying to end the conflict, and what ECOWAS may have done wrong and what they did get right. They also took a look at what the Mali leadership may have done wrong and what they could have done better to forestall such an occurrence. And then going forward, they also made certain recommendations. What Mali could do to improve governance now that they have a democratically elected government. So basically, these were the things that were touched on.
All right. Were there specific resolutions on particular kind of strategies that will be used to ensure that what they are recommending will be upheld?
Well, what we know is there were some recommendations. For example, one of them, is that ECOWAS now wants to concentrate on building the capacity of troops when it comes to terrorism combat. They want to, because it looks like ECOWAS had been dealing with conflicts all these years, but then this was a peculiar one. They had to deal with terrorism, and it was something a bit new to what ECOWAS was used to dealing with. So now they want to concentrate on building the capacity of the various troops within the sub-region in fighting terrorism. And also one thing that came to bear was that usually some of these conflicts or such terror acts have a source. They always have a source, and one of which is unemployment, youth unemployment. Once the youth feel neglected or once they are idle, then they begin to have ideas. And when a particular sect or a particular region within a country feels neglected, when they don't have good education, they don't have good infrastructure, and they are basically living in poverty, and where the disparity between the rich and poor is so wide, it triggers some of these conflicts and some of these terrorism. So it's not like a one-off thing that just starts overnight, then there's a conflict. It starts from somewhere. It could take years to build up to where Mali, to the state of Mali's conflict. So they looked at how the various governments within the region could help stop these things before they even, to nip them in the bud before they even generate into a big conflict.
All right. Thank you very much, Eunice. Thanks for updating us on the ECOWAS meeting they held in Ghana. That was our Ghana correspondent there reaching us from Accra there. Now, let's come back to this. The issue of common currency and free borders was one thing ECOWAS had advocated over time, but in true terms, they have not been able to achieve, especially the common currency.
Yeah, they've had their challenges, I mean, over the years. Sometimes, trying to find common grounds, in carrying out some of these objectives. Each particular member state of ECOWAS also has its own peculiarities, its own idiosyncrasies, and so on. And so when you talk about in a conglomeration more or less of the type that we see with ECOWAS, it's about these various groupings with various peculiarities and idiosyncrasies also, trying to find some common grounds, in order to move the continent forward. It is not something that is easy. I know that we have been able to have remarkable success when it comes to the European Union, for instance. But, it took a very long time before they were able to achieve that. The European Union has been, before they got to this particular stage, has been at it for decades before they were able to get to where they are. So compared to the European Union, and I know that people tend to look at the AU from the perspective of the European Union, the successes they have been able to achieve and so on. But again, it is said that a body is only as good as the members that make up that body.
Exactly.
And so you cannot have an ECOWAS that is very, very effective and very, very efficient, that is able to live up to its ideals and its objectives, for as long as you also have member states of the ECOWAS that are also embroiled in myriads of socio-political, economic problems and so on. So the ECOWAS as a body, regional, sub-regional body, can only be as strong as the members that make up the ECOWAS. So if they have not been able to have, make some achievements, it is, achieve something, I think it is also related or relative to the internal dynamics that play out in each of the ECOWAS, individual ECOWAS states. For instance, you talk about the monetary union. To some extent, the Francophone ECOWAS countries have been able to achieve that. About 8 countries operating a common currency, the French franc, with of course support from former colonial overlords, France. And then again, there's for the English-speaking part of ECOWAS, the West African, I think, monetary zone or so, comprising Nigeria, Ghana, Gambia, Sierra Leone, and I think one other English-speaking country, and then Guinea, that is not an English-speaking country that opted out of joining the French CFA zone in order to have accommodation with the English-speaking part of West Africa. Of course, that is historical. If you look at the history of Guinea, so it will not be a surprise. So they want to do that, and then with the hope that with time, if they're able to do that, establish that that's the eco currency in 2015, then they can now, over time, have a common.
Okay, we'll come back to this. Now, following the Lagos Treaty of 1975, a revised treaty intended to accelerate integration of economic policy and improve political cooperation, and that was signed in 1993. Now, part of its goals was to create a common economic market, a single currency, a West African parliament, and a court of justice. A quick break, and Africa Today will be right back. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. It's still Africa Today. We have Okwoche today with us in the studio. We're talking about the economic community of West African state and some of the challenges it faces and maybe some of its successes as well. Now, you were laying a foundation as regards how the dynamics of the play between Francophone and Anglophone countries and all of that. But the point there is some of these countries don't seem to especially when you're putting Ecowas on the platform, not all of them work together, trade together, and so on. Not all of them have so many historical common oneness, as the case may be. Do you think some of these plans of having one currency and so on is going to really?
No, it's a process. I think they are all resolved to do this. They are all resolved to work for the common good of all, and I think that stems from the knowledge, that. If they can open up their borders, if they can increase the level of investment within the sub-region and so on, if they can have a common market, if they can have a common currency and so on, then there is profit to be made by all the parties concerned. You understand? And so they have also realized, and I think that essentially that is the way the world is going now. Of course, we keep on talking about the world being a global, a village. And so within the, West African sub-region, there is the realization that the greatness and the development of the sub-region can be enhanced more, can be achieved more, much more, and much, faster if everybody work together, pool their resources together, their energy, to work towards a specific, developmental targets and objectives and so on. And so there is no doubt, in spite of, yes, the historical differences that, have arisen over time. Of course, the history of colonialism and the role that France played, the policy of assimilation and so on, that tended to make the average French person much more, French than perhaps even the French person. And of course, also differences between the colonial overlords in English-speaking West Africa.
Okay. Now, we have Judy Lowe of the Open Society Initiative for West Africa joining us on Africa Today from Abuja. Judy, it's good to have you on Africa Today. Now, what are your thoughts on the role of Ecowas in terms of security and military intervention?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me, Jude?
Yes,
welcome to Africa Today.
Thank you so much.
What's your assessment of ECOWAS when it comes to military intervention and security on the sub-region? Would you see it as effective?
Well, effectiveness is relative in this conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, but we have to accept the fact that ECOWAS has played a very important role in improving the safety and security situation within the sub-region. And they've also played a very significant role in ensuring that the values of democracy, as recognized in the ECOWAS Protocol on Democracy and Good Governance, are being respected across the region. And when you talk about security, there are various components to it. People can talk about security in terms of food security, security in terms of human security and all of that. But the important thing here is that there are many aspects of the life of the region that all culminate to determine whether or not you can assess progress in security. And so looking at it critically, we see an improvement in democratic governance in the region. We see an improvement in intervention in early warning system. We see an improvement in mediation processes. And to that extent, one can argue that, yes, there's been a significant movement in the right direction. Whether it is adequate is another issue. Of course, there are still gaps. But you and I, if you imagine the catastrophe that we had in Mali and the role ECOWAS played in that process, the crisis in Guinea, the role they played, the crisis in Cote d'Ivoire, the role ECOWAS played, it is something worth noting. But we must acknowledge the fact that there's much needs to be done, especially in the preventive mechanisms of ECOWAS, so that we don't get to a point where a president, for instance, refuses to accept the result, as we saw in Cote d'Ivoire. Rather, we get to a situation whereby before it actually happens, the mediation processes are put in place, a crisis management is already in place that averts the situation whereby people will start dying. So yes, I would argue that to a reasonable extent, there's been a remarkable improvement in the capacity of ECOWAS to intervene and promote and
all right, it's good to hear it's remarkable, but let's make comparison between the ECOWAS on one hand and the EAC and the SADC, for instance. These are other regional blocks, but how would you compare ECOWAS with these other blocks?
Again, the dynamics are different.
Okay.
In this, historically, dynamics are different in these regions.
Okay.
And so it is not a black or white kind of comparison. But in terms of structure, effectiveness, and coordination, I think within the African region, ECOWAS stands out.
Yeah.
Even in its funding, in ECOWAS' ability to raise funds, the tax policies that help ECOWAS to source funds for its operations. These are remarkable initiatives that other RECs within the region are interested in coming to understudy, so that they're able to actually do the same. I think if you also look at the role of the ECOWAS Court of Justice and the capacity of individuals to approach this court directly, these are some unique features of the ECOWAS system that stand out within the continent. So, looking at, again, accepting that there are differences in dynamics in the sub-regional bodies, still, ECOWAS stand out in its capacity to move from where it was in last 20 years and where it is now. I think it is quite acknowledged. It is quite proper to acknowledge that there are some unique features of the ECOWAS system that others can learn from.
Thank you very much, Jude, for your time on the program right now. Thanks for your contribution. Thank you. Right now, the challenges of ECOWAS, one way or the other. I know that ECOWAS, they are working to surmount all the challenges. But what do you think, from what's on ground now, what do you think are going to be the challenges of ECOWAS in the years to come? Well,
in terms of the individual states, like I keep on saying that ECOWAS can only be as strong as the strength it pulls together by, the individual states of ECOWAS. And there are some basic problems that characterize most of the ECOWAS countries. Of course, Nigeria is one of the largest economies in Africa, and of course in ECOWAS, in West Africa, it is simply a giant, and the economy is so huge. And of course, you know that even within Africa itself, that Nigeria accounts for about 1/5 of the entire population of Africa. And so it has a very, very huge economy in spite of the very serious economic crisis it is having. At the same time, there is the issue of grinding poverty that has blighted or it has been afflicting a lot of the ECOWAS member states. Right. And
but do you think all these challenges are surmountable?
They are surmountable. They are surmountable.
Because we're rounding off now, so I just want to...
No. They are surmountable. But you see, like when you talk about the issue of conflict and so on, from what your reporter said in Ghana, what are the sources of these problems and so on? Grinding poverty, the unemployment, joblessness, and so on. These are social problems that African leaders have to tackle. Otherwise, even if you stem the tide of terrorism and conflict in Mali, is going to rear its head again in other parts of the sub-region. Like we have the Boko Haram insurgency that is still on in Nigeria. So I would agree that it's about the commitment, it's about the ongoing commitment of African leaders. It's about, knowing, understanding the priorities that they have, as leaders, and they're working assiduously, to help their countries,
Okay.
to pull their countries out of the economic, especially issues that they have, and then working together in the sub-region as they are doing to take the sub-region to another level.
All right. Thank you very much, Ikechukwu, for
It's been a
coming on the
pleasure.
program.
Thank you.
Thank you
Yes,
very much.
yeah.
I will thank Judy Lo for joining us from Abuja, and our correspondent Eunice Jare from Accra in Ghana. Now, when we judge ECOWAS based on the crisis in Mali last year, then Africa will be setting itself back. Many believe there is room for improvement for regional blocs like ECOWAS, but unless leaders truly learn their lessons, it's unlikely that the problems in Africa will lessen. That's the show for today. You can also watch episodes of the show online on youtube.com/TVC Africa Today. And until we come your way again, I am Mike Okwoche. And don't forget, this is Africa. Bye for now.